we are also very privileged to invite them to this talk, and we will be talking about renewable energy. And our guest for today is Mr. Ramesh Nair. So I'll give you a brief about Mr. Ramesh Nair. Mr. Ramesh Ramachandran Nair is the Chief Executive Officer of Adani Solar at Adani Enterprises Limited since April 2017, and he has more than 25 years of experience working with reputed organizations like Essar Steel, Sterlite Industries, Balco, and Jindal Stainless. He has been instrumental in changing the manufacturing landscape through institutionalizing business excellence and governance and implementing successful turnaround strategies. Prior to joining Adani Group, Mr. Nair served as the Chief Executive Officer and Whole-Time Director of Bharat Aluminium Company Limited, that is Balco, from June 2013 until March 2017, that is just before coming to Adani. In over 11 years at Vedanta Group, he led multiple functions and assumed an overall leadership role at Sterlite Copper as its Chief Operating Officer from October 2008 to November 2011. Mr. Nair also served as an executive director and president of Jindal Stainless Limited from November 2011 to June 2013. Mr. Nair is a member of the governing council of the Indian Solar Manufacturing Association and is spearheading the cause of domestic manufacturing and renewable development in the country. He is a BTech in electrical engineering from National Institute of Technology, Kurukshetra, and also holds a postgraduate diploma in financial management. So that is Mr. Ramesh Nair for us. We are very privileged to have him. So a warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sen.
And over to you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you for the introduction, and indeed it's my pleasure, and I'm privileged to be invited to this forum and to address the new batch of AIM. So how big is your batch, if I may ask? Like, what's the size of the students?
Hiren, what is the size of the batch? 63, I guess.
Yes, that's right.
63. Okay. So
yeah,
that's nice. So from different parts of the country. So that's good. So I've been to institute and it's coming out. I think I've quite happy and quite happy at the alumni that we have also. We also have few of your previous batches with us, and so they're all doing quite well. So that's quite nice to see. And typically these forums should have been a little more interactive with, a little bit of personal touch, but then fine, COVID is what it is, and we have to get used to this new way of living for some time. But I always say, looking at the students, seeing them in front of you is far more easier and better. There's some echo. If everyone could go on mute. Yeah, okay. I think it's better in these kind of forums to be on mute continuously and then just unmute and speak and then mute again. Otherwise, there's an echo that comes when people are nearby. Okay, so it's the topic that has been given and that we are going to discuss is basically on the renewable energy. And I'm sure many of you have read a lot about renewable energy across the world and in India. And it is basically coming out of climate change that we need to get into source of energy where you are not using anything that is actually spoiling the nature, but basically aiding the activity of nature and preventing climate change and basically the temperature rise that comes with the climate change. And it's a known fact that temperatures have risen across the globe. And basically because of fossil fuel-based energy, there has been considerable increase in the global temperature, at least by a couple of degrees in the last about 50 years. And which has led to various changes in the world in terms of wind patterns, in terms of uh, unpredictable climates, in terms of the seasons shifting, in terms of timelines. There has been a lot of effect on this, and even in the renewable industry also, you will find that this has an impact. The whole climate change has an impact in terms of designing and making things happen. So the whole journey in India on renewables started with our Prime Minister Modi bringing out a particular vision of 175 gigawatts of which is a combination of 100 gigawatts of solar, about 75 gigawatts of wind, and 60 gigawatts of wind, and 10 gigawatts of biogas, and 5 gigawatts of small hydro. So this is something which is part of his vision, which he brought out in way back in 2014. And we also formulated the Indian Solar Alliance, which is actually headquartered in our country, with like-minded countries in terms of pushing the solar energy framework across the globe. And basically, we have a very passionate leader in the country who is really focused on renewable energy, and which has given the required fillip in terms of growing this industry across the globe, across the country. Today, as we stand against 175 gigawatt of what we have in terms of vision that we have by 2022, I think the country stands at something close to 70 gigawatts at this point of time. And basically, we are a little behind, but then as we see, the government is galloping on it. And we expect that at least we will be at about 150 to 160 gigawatts by 2022 in terms of projects awarded, maybe not completed. There may be a little bit of slippage, but in terms of projects awarded, I think we'll be very close by that time. And maybe in implementation also, we could be around 70-80% of what the target the country has taken. And when we say renewable, I'm sure all of you know, we are talking solar, we are talking wind, we are talking battery storage, we are talking offshore wind. We are also talking biogas, we are talking small hydro. Also anything that basically is driven from the nature. The energy is basically coming out of nature. Batteries are basically a replacement to fossil fuel in EVs, and also it has got multiple applications in storage of energy. And I'll come to that as we talk. I think there are very interesting insights to this whole thing. So I think recently the country also has revised its target of renewable to 450 gigawatts by 2030. And this is also in line with the fact that the country is expected to grow in terms of power consumption. As you see, India's per capita power consumption is pretty low as compared to the rest of the world. We could be around 1,000 units per person, obviously because of a large population, plus also the fact that energy is used very limited in many parts of the country. And when we see electrification is just like putting a bulb in a village and we say it's electrified, it doesn't mean every person has electricity in his house. Even today, that's how it is read. But fine, things are moving fast in this country in terms of power. The days of shortage, days of power cut is almost behind us. I don't know how many of you youngsters would actually know about like about 10 years back, we were so used to power cuts all the time. I think those kind of days are quite behind us because of the various reforms that power has undertaken, the power sector has gone through, the various reforms in transmission, distribution, and the multiple things, which has given the fillip to the power industry. So when we coming to solar, which is the largest in terms of the renewable, the landscape is that the country has done about 36 gigawatts. It is growing at the fastest CAGR in India, the solar energy plants. So maybe in excess of about 30-40%, because the primary focus is on solar and to get into 100 gigawatts of solar by 2022. In terms of wind, also we are around the similar installation, something like about 30, 36, 37 gigawatts of wind is installed in the country. And the wind has got limited scope, and the overall potential in the country in wind could be not more than about, I don't have the number, could be about 170, 180 gigawatts in the country in terms of potential of wind. And potential of solar is, I think, to the tune of something like about, I think if my number is right, something like about 750 gigawatts the country can have wind in the long run. How much do we do it? How much do we tap it is a different matter. But this is the potential that we have. Now, so then solar energy basically comes out of sun. So you have polysilicon cells, which typically on a semiconductor PN junction, a diode mode generates DC current, and then that's all collected, 72 cells in one module collected, and then it is the DC gets converted to AC, and then it's like given and connected to the grid. A series and parallel network of solar panels. I think Adani Group has built one of the largest solar farms in Tamil Nadu, in Kamuthi. It's about 700 megawatt long back in 2016-17, and that is one of the largest at that point of time. Today, obviously, a bigger one has been installed in Riva by the Prime Minister Modi, if you noted, sometime back, a week back, a week or 10 days back. That's about 750 megawatts of solar farm that was inaugurated by the Honorable Prime Minister. So when we talk renewable, in India, the primary focus today is on solar. Wind is already there, but solar is expected to overtake wind in the current year or in the years that we follow, because the number of projects in solar are much higher, for the fact that the potential also in the country is much higher on solar. And then the biggest benefit of renewable at this point of time is because the price of generation of renewable energy has actually come down, and is actually lower than the cost of generation of power from coal, which means it is giving the conventional energy sector quite a run for its money in terms of, so we don't expect, in this country, we don't expect too much of thermal energy to come up in the long run. We would expect more and more solar, more and more wind to come up. And in that, the CUF is a capacity utilization factor, which in coal can be as high as 90% plus, or PLF that we call. But in solar, typically today it's about 25-26%. In wind is about 40%. So and they are seasonal. For example, sun is quite seasonal on a daily basis. It peaks in the afternoon, and it just sort of goes down to zero by the end of the day or by the starting of the day. Wind is also more towards the early morning hours and towards the dawn and dusk, and also in the night time. But also wind has got its cyclicity because of the seasons at different points of time in the year. For example, during monsoons or during the June to December period, it generates maximum in different parts of the country. For example, Tamil Nadu, wind is almost like a few gigawatts at some point of the time, and it goes all the way to 2,000 megawatts during the periods of monsoons in October, November, December period. So there is a certain amount of cyclical loading and cyclical generation that happens in renewable, for the fact that it is dependent on the nature. And but then that is one challenge the renewable industry has at this point of time, to balance it along with thermal and sort of make a win-win combination. So in the country, where the country is headed to is like a base load of thermal, followed by renewable coming on top, and the overall per capita of the country also going up as we talk. And there are various predictions basis 5%, 6%, 7% growth year on year, in line with the GDP growth. But if the GDP growth slows down, obviously the power consumption growth also slows down. So for the current year, actually, the energy sector has actually shrunk a little bit because of COVID and the fact that energy is not getting consumed. So that's one part of renewable when we talk about solar. Wind is the other part, basically in Gujarat and Tamil Nadu, you find maximum windmills in this country, parts of Rajasthan too. But then the problem of wind is that there is a problem of seasonality of wind. In wind sector, obviously, there is a lot of manufacturing in this country, and there are very popular names that Suzlon and Vestas and Siemens, Inox. They're all there, and And but in terms of solar manufacturing, we don't have such large players, but Adani is the largest player in terms of manufacturing of solar, with 1.5 gigawatts of wind and 1.5 gigawatts of cells and modules. And there are various other players, some in module manufacturing like Wari, Vikram Solar, which is also quite old. Wari Group is there. Then you've got Renewables Group. You've got Jupiter in cells, and there are a lot of new players also slowly coming into solar manufacturing. So today, as we talk, it is a little bit of a time when things are happening in the solar manufacturing sector, and even Adani as a group is actually migrating to about 3.5 gigawatts of solar panel and cells manufacturing as we talk. And we have won the tenders. It's only a question time of taking off. I think we should be doing it in a month's time from now when we start the procurement and then engineering, procurement and construction of this 3.5. So somewhere next year, mid of next year, the solar manufacturing landscape in this group would be around 3.5 gigawatts, and in the country would actually exceed 10 gigawatts plus in modules and maybe about 5 to 6 gigawatts in cells. So these are very important because manufacturing in the country is very important because that generates jobs, that generates the economy, that generates the churning of the economy that we call happens through manufacturing. And that generates jobs for all the youngsters like you, a lot of engineers coming out, a lot of PhDs, you name it. So the youth of the country currently needs jobs. I think that's the biggest issue that the country is facing today. And that's where the whole manufacturing landscape will kick in terms of providing the right jobs. In solar, we have ground mounted, we have rooftop solar, we have solar which is used for now solarizing pumps, which is basically a subsidized sector in the country. I think that particular aspect of pumps is going to be a big turnaround if implemented well. We have to see it across the next couple of years, how it will play out. Because the solarization of pumps basically removes the need for subsidy to farmers in the long run, and so that the amount of subsidy that gets flown, that is getting eaten away by the agricultural sector, could actually be a big turnaround for the various discoms at this point of time. So, and the overall energy cost in the country, in the domestic side, also is expected to come down with all these improvements. There's other side of solar, which is known as floating solar, wherein dead water bodies of not great use, embankments or catchment areas, part of it, you can put these floating solars and use a water body as the base, and the solar panels sit on that particular floating base, and it's anchored at the bottom. And that's one thing that's also picking up slowly in the country as we talk, because that's a lot of water bodies which are not really put to use in the country. So the largest project commissioned till date in solar floating solar is quite low, but then maybe in some few megawatt sizes. But we expect that to actually pick up as we go forward. Wind, I have talked to you, so it's growing at a CAGR of about 10 to 12% in the last 5 years, and the LOC, that is life cycle cost of the sector, solar and wind sector, is actually falling as we talk. Every time there's a tender, there's a new price discovered which is lower than the previous one. When we talk renewable, there's something known as offshore energy too, which is basically you put wind away from the land, and that's a very that is expected to have large potential, but at this point of time it's in a nascent phase, and we don't have much of few megawatt installations across the globe, but then expected to move into gigawatt levels in the next 4-5 years. Very interesting in the renewable energy. When we talk energy totally, we should also talk about when we talk energy, it's not only electricity. Electric energy in this country is just about 18% of the total energy requirements. You've got a major requirement of petroleum products, which drives the automobile industry, drives the various furnaces, and they are also fossil fuels with their carbon footprint, carbon dioxide. So the one big thing I'm sure all of you are aware of is electrical mobility, which is going to be one of the big things in the world. It is actually growing in leaps and bounds as we talk. Every country wants to do it. Obviously, the technology of battery, which technology to be used, these things keep going back and forth because it is in a growth phase, this particular industry, battery. And but we definitely expect the projections are like what? We had about 200 gigawatt hour of battery capacity in 2019, energy storage, and then it's expected to go to about 800 gigawatts hour in 2025 globally. So that's a kind of 4 times the size it will grow in the next about 4-5 years. So that's a kind of projection that we have a battery. And a lot of your fossil fuel cars would actually start getting replaced by battery. While India has got a yearly India sales of automobiles in India something like in tune of about 25 million. But India is primarily a two-wheeler market. So we just have about 22 million of out of the 25 million cars or vehicles sold in India, 22 million are basically two-wheelers. The remaining maybe 2-3 million are your four-wheelers, and the remaining are your heavy vehicles. So batteries can typically come into two-wheeler markets very fast in India, and it can also get into the four-wheeler market. But I think the focus of the government now is actually to push it more in the two-wheeler market, and that basically gives us huge scope for batteries in this country. And then batteries also used, different forms of batteries in the country are also used for energy storage. For example, like we said, solar peaks in the afternoon. So the renewable energy is all seasonal. So you need to, when you don't need that energy, you need to store it somewhere and then use it when you need it. For example, at the peak times in a day when the power demand goes up, like in the afternoons or in the evenings, and sometimes in the night time. Again, the peak hours change depending on the season. And but broadly in the evening, late evenings time, when all of us sitting at home, we switch on. Or the night, in summers, it actually extends to the night, where the air conditioning load goes up. So all these kind of things. So you can actually use batteries to pump in energy whenever you want. Store it when there is excess generation on the grid, and then pump it back to the grid when you really need it. So it actually sort of obviates a lot of peaks where there's a scarcity of power at some point of time, and that can be obviated by this kind of battery grid storages. But that's also going on as we talk, and the government is adequately focused on it. But then these are sectors which are actually, if you ask me, they're sunrise sectors. They have to take off in India, and I think it'll take off in the next couple of years. One big thing in renewable is when we talk about liquid fuel, it's called hydrogen. Hydrogen today is made from fossil fuels, from normal methodology. That's not what you're talking about. If you Google about hydrogen, you will see there is something known as a blue hydrogen, green hydrogen, and there is I think, the one which comes from fossil fuel is called, I don't know if it's called black hydrogen or something like that. These are all there in Wikipedia. You can actually look up yourself and read about it. But then it's a very interesting subject, hydrogen economy. Because if you create hydrogen from water through renewable energy, for example, like I get solar power, do electrolysis of water, get hydrogen out, and then hydrogen goes into as a fuel into automobiles, and then or in various other applications, and then you burn hydrogen, get the energy, and then the output is again water. The waste product of hydrogen is actually typically water. So that is a very very green way of doing things, basically. So you don't need anything. It's actually greener than vehicles running on batteries. It's definitely better than vehicles running on batteries in terms of the carbon footprint or the green aspect of it. So when we talk about this particular industry, this is again coming out quite well. The Japanese have invested quite a bit in it. As we talk, there is a certain city in Canada, I don't know if more are there, Vancouver, which practically runs all its heavy vehicles. When I talk heavy, I'm talking about buses, which is used for mass transportation, practically runs on hydrogen. Hydrogen has its own challenges in terms of rarity, in terms of its cryogenic requirement, in terms of its volume, in terms of its density. There are a lot of issues and risks that it comes along with it. But then these are things which the world is learning to handle it. And it's very similar to natural gas. When you transport it, is very cryogenic, LNGs. And similarly, liquefying hydrogen and then sort of transporting it. But again, there is a problem of hydrogen is very thin. So packing it in a volume, and then sort of there are risks that is associated with it. As a group, Adani is not in hydrogen. While we talk about it, obviously, we talk about all forms of energy in this group. But at this point of time, we are not put our footprint into hydrogen at this point of time. And this is broadly. I thought I'll give you a certain perspective about renewable energy, but then definitely every sector of renewable energy is a sunrise sector, wherein we are seeing the world actually shifting to renewable more and more, and there's a general desire that there should be an elimination of fossil fuel uh, for energy purposes across the globe. While we think in India it's a far cry because there are multiple challenges in this country in terms of making it happen, but then the overall footprint in the country would actually keep on increasing, and the more and more energy would actually be made from renewable as we talk. Maybe I think by 2030, about 30 to 40% of the country's energy would actually come from renewable sources. As a group in Adani also, we have a large footprint. We're talking about 11 gigawatt of pipeline in solar wind put together in the country, and we have a vision of taking it to 25 gigawatts. And currently, if you ask me, the overall what is operating assets versus the total assets in Adani Group, around 25% will be renewable, but then we think that that will go up to about 50% as we go forward. So currently it's about 16-17%, I stand corrected, and which we're planning to increase to something like about 50% in the next about 5 to 6 years or 7 years. So that's where we stand, and so I think I will leave I think I've given quite a lot of data and numbers out. So I thought I can take some questions from the people, from the students, and make it a little more interactive.
Sure, sir. Thank you for your inputs. Uh, Sir, you have been in this industry, the energy industry, and especially in the renewable sector for quite some time. So, before we take up some questions, and questions are already popping in, the students are eager to know from you. I have a few questions that where do you see India? India is a big market for the renewables, and there has to be a shift from transition from the fossil fuels to the renewables very fast, and our present government is working on that. So where do you see India in future? So if we talk about say 20 years from now, the developed countries have already done a lot regarding renewables, but we have just started in that sense. So, say from 20 years from now, what are our opportunities that we have, or where do you see India as a country?
No, I think India. I wouldn't say it has started late. Yeah, maybe a little as compared to the developed nations, we can say that. But then I think we are catching up pretty fast. We're the third largest market in terms of solar at this point of time as we talk. And if you look at the vision that we have, see today the country has about 330, 340 gigawatts of power generation capacity in the country. But then out of which something like about 70 gigawatts is only renewable. Okay. And out of the 350 gigawatts, about 190 gigawatt is my consumption. That's a peak. It moves somewhere between 170 to 190 gigawatts. The current numbers for the last couple of months are pretty low, a little low, because obviously there has been a dip because of COVID, and there was a loss of energy generation and capacities. But then on a normal plane, if you talk about 190 gigawatts is my normal consumption out of 330, 340 gigawatts installed in the country. There's a factor of consumption and various PLFs that each source of energy gives as we talk. This 330, 340, we expect it to double in the next about 5 to 6 years. And so that will be generally, and out of which we feel about 30 to 40% of the energy at least 30% energy should come from renewable sources. And that's where the focus of the group is also. So while we don't expect fossil fuels to get phased out in the next 10, 20 years in India, because that's not possible, because there is an advantage of coal generating plants and advantage that comes from various, because they give a base load. The beauty of a coal generating plant is it can be stopped very fast, and the PLF achieved, like if a 100 megawatt power plant, a coal or a 1000 megawatt power plant, I can actually run 1000 megawatt also consistently. So when you want a load which is very consistent, and energy, a generation capacity which is consistent across 24 hours, 365 days, I think even today a coal generating power plant would win hands down. The renewable is actually a top up at this point of time, which can be used in various parts of the country at different points of time for various applications. For agricultural load, which is not required 24/7, is not required for an agricultural load, or for the fact of residential loads, for the matter that you have difference. So, and there is a lot of things talking about, there's an overall national grid now where energy moves. There's an energy exchange. So the energy is now it's like almost like a commodity in the country. So I think I expect this country to at least about 30% to 40% of the energy should come from renewable in the next about 10 to 15 years.
Okay, so that means we have so much of opportunities, so much of challenges in the renewable sector, and especially in the solar energy. So, considering that our students, the incoming students, would be entering their academic journey in a few days from now, and all of them may not be aware of the terms in the of the energy sector. I would like to clarify here that Sir is talking about gigawatts every now and then. So gigawatts, I will give you an idea as to what it is. So in our houses, we use energy and we measure it through kilowatts. So kilowatts, it is just like having kilobytes in computer memory. We measure it in kilobytes, then megabytes, then gigabytes. It's the same thing. We in energy sector, we use kilowatts, that we measure our energy consumption at home. And when we talk about manufacturing energy, that is generating energy, we do it in megawatts and in a large scale. So when we talk about a country like India or US or Europe, we do it in gigawatts. So that is one thing. Another is that he just now talked about cold start. So for example, there is something also like hot start, just the opposite of it. So if we take coal, like in thermal power plants, coal is burned to produce electricity, and for that you need some time so that the coal is burned, and then it heats up water. The water becomes steam, it rotates a turbine, and then it generates electricity. But in a solar power plant, you don't need such an elaborate procedure. The solar power plant, you just fix it, the sun is up there, and it will start manufacturing or it will start generating electricity. So it is just like it's called cold start. You don't need any gestation period or time for generating electricity. So these are some of the terms that we use in the energy sector. And some of the students are really interested to know about the present COVID situation. So how is it affecting the business in the solar energy sector or in the energy sector on the whole? So if you can please...
what happened with COVID was that what I talked about 120, 170, 180 gigawatt of power consumption, actually it came down to as low as 120, 130 gigawatts. That was in the end of March, early April. That was when the country went on a total lockdown. As we talk now, it's almost coming back to the original numbers, because most of the industrial activity has started. Most of the country has gone back to normalcy in terms of economy or economical activity or industries running or plants running or even malls or anything for that matter. So the overall load in the country has almost come back to the pre-COVID times as we talk. Maybe it's a little lesser, no doubt. But the fact that there will be a rationalization and impact of COVID on the energy sector for the reason that a lot of offices are still not running, a lot of work from home is happening, a lot of commercial space is not getting occupied as we talk. And but then it is slightly getting offset by increase of consumption in the from homes also. People sitting at home, obviously consumption at homes have gone up. So COVID has had that impact of having a dip in between, but then I think it's coming back to normal. But then the overall impact of COVID on the economy in terms of slowing down the economy, slowing down investment, general slowdown in the economy would actually hit the energy sector also. So we do not expect, we expect that by end of next year, that is March 2021, we would see that actually the energy sector in this current year would have actually shrunk a little bit as compared to the previous year, or would be flat. That's the expectation, but it can change any point of time. It is nothing that, it is not my study, it is what we read. So there is an expectation that it could be flat or it could slightly shrink. Growth is not expected in the energy sector for the current year. But definitely in the subsequent years, it will actually start again picking up when things come back to normal. So this a blip for a year, one temporary blip for a year is expected in the current year as we talk. In terms of renewable industry, I think it's not affecting it much. The investments are going as planned earlier. The manufacturing is also happening. The government is pushing because we have to achieve our target of 175 gigawatts by 2022 in the country. So that particular focus is on, and the government is pushing it. And I think most of the work and all the projects are now, as we talk, happening across the country. And but yes, on the consumption side, for the fact that there has been loss of jobs in the country, loss of income, a lot of things have got disrupted because of COVID. You would generally expect that the consumption of energy also would come down, be it petroleum, be it electricity. There would be generally a slowdown in the country for some time, and then it will sort of pick up again. So you may have a curve which goes down and then sort of start going up on a parabola type graph. So that's what it looks like. Yeah. Did I answer that question? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So another question is that Adani recently won the world's biggest bid for solar energy, and then this COVID has happened, and the future is uncertain, quite uncertain. So and the contract has to be completed within a time period of 5 years. So are the executives in Adani, they are doing anything so that that contract can be completed within 5 years? I know it's very premature to ponder on this, but the way without COVID we would have, or Adani would have taken up the entire things, things have definitely slowed down quite a bit. So any effect on that?
No, we don't expect any effect on that. I think it's a tender that is one of the largest tenders, that is basically 8 gigawatts of development, and along with it about 2 gigawatts of manufacturing also would happen. And that is what I was referring to you when I was talking that we would be expanding. So that's very exciting time for the group, and we are very proud that we got the tender also, and that makes us one of the largest players in renewable energy in the country. And I don't think COVID would have any impact on that as we talk. So that's not a point of concern at this point of time.
And another question that comes up, that if we compare solar energy with wind energy or hydro energy, then in a given area, so it can be 1 hectare or 1,000 hectare, whatever it is, in a given area, which produces more energy? Which form of energy is more efficient, or it produces more energy?
That's a good question. I don't have an answer to it. Maybe we're going to come back to you on that. But each of them is a function not only of the area. Obviously, area is important, but it's also a factor of where you're locating it. Like solar energy is not the same across the country. Some states actually they have more potential for solar. For Gujarat, Rajasthan, they actually have more potential for this thing. The climate matters, at what temperature you are installing it. But like we say, Leh is one installation where it's an ideal installation for solar because the temperature is low, 25 degrees, which is the ideal temperature for generation from solar panels. But then it has another issue of certain loss of generation during winter months, because there'll be snowing and there'll be cloudy. So it's very difficult to bring that out. But maybe I'll try to. It's a good answer thing. I don't know if you have datas like that, because every state has got different potential. Like wind has got some states have wind potential. So if you put them in some other place, you will not get wind. So you cannot compare. But apple to apple, I think you cannot mix both. And obviously, wind has got higher PLF. For example, if I put a 100 megawatt wind farm, I can generate about 40, 37, 38 megawatts of power. So about 38% PLF. In terms of solar, the current PLF with sudden loading and other things, if you do about 27, 28% is what we achieved at this point of time. For a given installation, if I put 100 megawatt solar, I would actually generate about 28 megawatts across a 24-hour period. So all we are talking is all across 24-hour period. Again, in wind, you got the seasonality also coming into it. There are certain months when wind does not generate at all, but solar wouldn't have that kind of a problem. Solar is almost across the year it will generate. Wind would not generate in some months. It will generate very less, not very high. But in certain months when it's very windy or when there is monsoons, when the wind flows well, then you will find the wind is actually generating substantially. Hydro is also a function of rains. You know, if you have rains and the catchment is full, then the hydro generation is much better than. And if you have a year where the rains are not there, obviously that generation also comes down across the year. So there are various factors in this, but typically I don't have an answer that a question that for a given acre or hectare, what would generate more.
Okay, so for the clarification of students, here again one term was new to many of you. So PLF stands for plant load factor. So plant load factor.
Typically, if you have 100 megawatts of plant, how much can I run it at? What is the capacity across at certain timeline, average capacity across 24-hour period? So in a coal, you can get about 95, 96%, but in solar, you'll get about 27, 28%, and in wind, you will get something like about 38%.
Yeah, so that was a piece of information. So, sir, you talked about hydrogen as a fuel for vehicles, right? But in India or in many of the countries, electric vehicles are much more common than hydrogen vehicles. So, and if we look at India from the context of India, then India does not have till now any policy on electric vehicles. So, is this a deterrent in the adoption of electric vehicles or the proliferation of electric vehicles?
No, there is definitely a policy on electrical vehicles. It is there from the MNRE and also from Niti Aayog. That is in public domain. But obviously, the issue is that when I move from the conventional, that's why I said India, about predominant sales of vehicles in India are in two-wheelers. And out of 25 million sold every year, about 22 million goes into two-wheelers, and then about 2 million or something a little around that goes into four-wheelers, and about 1 million or less than that goes into your heavy vehicles like your lorries and transportation kind of stuff, buses and those kind of things. So when you look at these markets, these are all CM data. It's in the public domain of SIAM. And when we look at these sectors of EVs, so India's predominant push is in two-wheelers because that is where the adoption can be very fast. And you need very small batteries for it. Some 6 kilowatt, 7 kilowatt, 8 kilowatt, 10 kilowatts, depending on the size of the bike and other things. That's all you need for each this thing. But the problem in to take off these things in this country is that once I start pushing this so hard from the government, what happens is that the overall engine industry, because the moment you put batteries, I don't need engines. I just run batteries and electric motor. That's what is driving the bike or the car or whatever you call it. So the whole industry of IC engines, the piston cylinder industry, the overall, the whole engine industry, which currently you will see as engines in the cars in the front when you open the front bonnet, that whole industry gets vanished practically. It will not have much of business. So there is generally a pressure on the government to sort of phase this slowly and prepare the economy to sort of move into this step by step. Because if you suddenly phase out a whole lot of economic activity comes down, and there will be the general fear in the industry. Like for example, if I say batteries will, from 1 year from now, if I declare that all the vehicles have to be EVs, what will happen is people stop buying vehicles at this point of time, and then suddenly the whole auto industry will come to a standstill. So these are things which the government is playing with. Step by step, they would do it slowly. And even in China, if you ask, these are things which happen quite slowly, and you cannot exactly disrupt one industry to bring another industry up. But I think across 10 years, it will actually definitely pick up in India quite substantially. The other challenge currently in India for EVs are the charging stations. While bikes and these things can be charged even at home, it will not be much of an issue. And the round trip efficiency, what you call a batteries, when we say the charging cycles of battery, because like you're filling petrol, you need to charge them with power. This industry, batteries. So that part of it also would take a sort of maturity in the country. You need, just like your petrol pumps, you need charging stations, especially if you have four-wheelers and you want to go on a long drive. Currently, batteries do not give more than 300 to 400 kilometers, 300 kilometers on one charge in cars, and which is far lesser if you want to just drive from here to say some city outside. But then EV vehicles within city is something that can actually catch up much faster, wherein you don't need to travel large kilometers, but you just move from one place to other place, then they sort of suit. So there are multiple factors that is playing on EV. So all these things, the sector has to mature in, and at the right time, I think slowly the phasing out of fossil fuel will happen, but not in a jiffy, not like when you think about it. It will happen across the next 5 to 10 years. That's what is expected, step by step.
Okay, and our students are also concerned about right now what should they do or how should they prepare themselves so that after the end of 2 years they might be able to impress you or someone from the industry, or in other terms, we in other terms we might say that okay, they would be very employable. So what should be they focusing on?
Uh, for them to be employable or for them to be successful in employment, I don't know, both, I think. So no, I think see, there are various sectors in this country, and like I always say to young students is that the past is not a reflection of the future anymore. Okay, so there is a whole lot of disruption happening in the way we work, in the way we do things, the way things are being done in the world. It's actually going through a lot of disruption, a lot of change, and this will only keep on happening in the world as we look forward. So fundamentally, no experience of past is going to be a guarantee of success for future, because the future is always different from what you've seen in the past. Um, Energy is one sector where we expect maximum disruption in the world as we talk. And it is one sector which has been even classified by the magazine Economist as one of those sectors where you'll have maximum disruption due to technology. There is also, with batteries, with solar and other things coming up, your house becomes just think about it, your house becomes a mini generator. And you have a battery at home, you have a solar panels on your roof, that generates power, that charges the battery. You're also connected to the grid, but you can choose the power. You'll have smart grids, smart meters, wherein you can choose the amount of energy you want from where, from your own system, from the battery. A lot of things are happening, in terms of energy, because these are things. You'll have smart apps which will be controlling energy. So energy is something that we expect a huge amount of churn to happen in the world. Movement from fossil fuel to renewable hydrogen coming in, different forms of battery actually kicking in, and the battery is improving every time new technology and battery comes. They're even better than the previous one, and it's a very fast moving sector, the battery sector at this point of time. So all these factors, you would find energy is actually one of the is a sector which is going to get highly disrupted as we go forward. Like for example, today, the world is not talking anymore about the prediction is, I don't know if you have noticed, most of the automobile companies today talk about mobility. They do not talk about owning a car. Even that as a concept is going to change in the world. Like, would you actually own a car, or would you actually look at mobility? That's the whole point. So there are multiple facets to the whole thing that currently that's happening in the world. and in the country. So there's a lot of disruption. So I would say to remain employable, always be up to the you should be up to speed on what's happening in the world. A continuous learning culture, understanding new things, being open to new thoughts, new ideas, and like I can say I've worked for more than 27, 28 years, but whatever I've done before and what I'm doing now are completely different. So it's about how much you learn, how much you are able to grasp what is happening in the industry, and the employability or the acceptance as you grow up the ladder would actually come from being more and more uh, knowledgeable, more and more having an attitude of continuous learning and continuous upgradation of ourselves, because no amount of studies or no amount of experience is going to be a guarantee for success in life. What is going to be success in life, I think, I'm sure all the a lot of teachers and professors would have told you, but at the risk of repetition, I would say it's more of the attitude and the logic that you apply in life, and the kind of approach you have, the positivity and the kind of the way you look at issues, look at people, look at managing manpower. These are the skills which will actually be highly required. And innovation is going to be a big thing in the world. It's already a big thing in the world. A lot of large companies in Bay Area or in the Silicon Valley are all out of innovation. So it started by very young people, 25, 26 years old people. They started and they're like multi-billion conglomerates at this point of time with no experience. It's just an idea which takes off. So today the value for ideas and the value for a consistent thought process, innovation, a proper attitude, I think that has got much better weightage than, like when I was young, we used to say, I don't know, Dr. Sen would remember, we were supposed to know the multiples, 1 to 10 and all those kind of things. Today, those kind of things do not seem to be of any relevance. Even the education system in the country is changing now. People are asking that why do we need this conventional form of education anymore when most of the knowledge is actually at the tip of a button. Even like I talked about hydrogen, you would learn a lot about hydrogen if you just go to the Google. There are multiple articles, multiple research items, multiple things on this, people have written. So knowledge is no longer, you don't need to memorize things anymore. The conventional way of teaching was to make you memorize things. Today, and you have to memorize, and then you have to put it on a answer sheet. But if you see currently the world, actually, do you need it? If you ask yourself, actually, you don't need it anymore. What is required is how do you have knowledge, you have data, everything lying on your iPad or whatever you call laptops or wherever. How do you interpret it? How do you use it? And how do you use it analytically and find solutions to your problems? I think that's more important. And actually, education is slowly shifting towards that now. From memorizing and then vomiting it on an answer sheet, it is slowly moving towards your analytical skills, your logic. How are you using the knowledge to interpret things? How are you using the knowledge to solve case studies? I think that's where the crux of education is moving today. And that's also the right way, because that's another revolution happening in the form of education. And multiple choices given to students today. You can pick and choose subjects. You can do whatever you want, specialize. And I think the youngsters of today are in quite a good shape, because you can make a career out of anything today. It was not what was about 20, 30 years back. Today, anything is a career, as long as you know how to pitch it, launch it, and market it. So that's the beauty of the current internet age. The millennials have that benefit, the fact that you can make a career out of anything. You don't need to be conventionally a corporate guy to make a career for yourself. But it's always about excellence and your attitude and your logic, which will actually keep you in good stead as you go forward.
So guys, I'll tell you that this is a gem of advice from you, from Mr. Nair, because he talked about the multiplication tables, and after we grew up, after we have done with our multiplication tables, there were logarithmic tables. We didn't have to memorize that, but we had to use that. I'm sure that a majority of the students would not have even seen logarithmic tables right now. So till date.
Correct.
So the crux of the matter is that whether you have a calculator or you have a logarithmic table or you have a mobile laptop, doesn't matter, but your ability to learn, your ability to interpret things, to find your way out is what matters. So it's like that. See, in the US, when people go to the US, they are or Indians are considered to be very strong in mathematics in the US and all over the world for that reason. So it is not that they just only have learned the mathematical tables, but they know how to apply that knowledge at the right place. So tools are given to you. So he has talked about Wikipedia, has talked about Google. So you should be able to find out that tool, use that tool to your advantage, so that, like you said, that
You seem to have gone on mute, Dr. Sam.
would be no problems for you. So learning aptitude must be there. It's not that these 2 years are the last 2 years of your academic life, but what we would say that these are the first 2 years of your meaningful learning in life. So if you take this seriously and if you are looking forward towards challenges, looking forward towards learning new things, then it would be very, very encouraging or very, very invigorating for you. A journey, a very enjoyable journey, isn't it, sir?
Yeah, you should be like a child. You see a child, they will keep asking questions, and the parents will get irritated. But then a child is a child. He challenges, people who are much older to them. So I think you and all of you should have that, bubbliness in you, the childlike approach, wherein you ask questions, have a lot of energy, radiate magnetism, and take life easy. Take life easy. It's not important always to win. It's important to do well and excel in what you do. It's not about coming first or always, be a winner. That's a very cliched way of doing your things, I would say. When you chase excellence, when you do things right, when you learn things right, then that is what is going to give you a long-term success and a long-term benefit in life. So keep that going, and whatever you do excellently. If you want to climb a mountain tomorrow, do it well. If you want to become a CEO in a corporate, okay, chase that in a very healthy manner, chasing excellence. You want to be a good teacher, or you want to be a good orator, or you want to be a good whatever. You choose your line, but then do it well. That's what I will always say, and that's what life is about. Uh, like I would say, there are no absolute success and failures in life. It's all about how you think about it, and be low on comparisons, be low on comparing yourself with other people, but then be very high on your personal excellence. I think that's what will take you forward.
So, in a nutshell, what Sir says is that go and watch the movies Three Idiots once again from another perspective. Don't be like Chatur, try to be like Rancho.
Yes. I think excellence of character is very important. That's most important. Remaining generally follows in line. Yeah.
So, one of the students asked a question that what is the current comparison of costs of generating electricity if we take renewable energy, different forms of renewable energy? So solar versus hydro versus wind, or for that reason nuclear.
Nuclear is not renewable anyway. It's not classified as renewable. If you look at solar, wind, they are practically now at the same level of cost of generation, about 2.5 rupees per unit. And hydro also would be around the same number, a little bit here and there. But they are all now currently lower than what coal cost is, which is at about 3 rupees plus. So that's where it stands. So that's why I said renewable, the biggest advantage of renewable today in the last couple of years has been its cost actually coming down dramatically, with the overall capital cost coming down, technology actually helping, and various facets to it in the cost structure. So the capital cost has come down dramatically. So that has actually benefited, and the PLF going up. that's also another big factor because you can generate more out of the same asset. So that's also giving us more lower cost as we go forward.
Sir, now tell us something about your experience in the corporate sector. You have been working for so long, for more than 2 decades, almost three
I thought I
decades.
told you. I thought I told you there's nothing that I've done actually matters except 3-4 things. Yeah. Okay. I can talk about it since you asked for it. See, I basically come from metal sector.
Something to encourage our students.
Yeah. No. I would say I came from a metal sector and about 3.5 years in renewable. But even in metal sector, energy is always part of the like in Balco, we had about 2,000 megawatts of power plant. So uh, the conventional energy is always part of a metal sector. We were also selling energy out, and you're also generating energy for running our aluminum smelter. But yeah, in corporate, since I've come primarily from metal sector, I was in copper, and then I moved into steel, and then I moved into aluminum, and then from there I moved into renewable. So I'm one of those people who have headed companies in all these sectors. So it's a little bit of a varied experience, but that's what I liked about it. And I like to challenge myself. I like to take new sectors, new responsibilities, because generally I tend to get bored with the same sector for a long time. So it's not something that really attracts me for a long time. If I'm doing the same job day in, day out, irrespective of the fact that it gives me money or not is a secondary point. What is important is, am I learning at all times? But yeah, corporate sector is when you work in a corporate, when you work in any corporate, I think most important is uh, maintaining, most important is what I told earlier, a right attitude, a complete focus on the right logic and learning. There is no shortcut to success. You cannot become a CEO in 10 years. You can become, I'm not saying you cannot become, but you cannot become a CEO in 10 years, even if you have a vision for it, unless you have a real vision for it and you have a real, you chase excellence and a little bit of, you also need the right opportunity to come onto your lap. So you can, like, I was a CEO of the Sterlite Copper business at a very young age, but then I will never say that I was the only good guy available in the market at that point of time. It's a factor of a lot of luck, a lot of favorable circumstances that comes your way, and how you encash those circumstances. How do you make it a success? Make yourself a success out of it. That's most important. And all of us would have those kind of moments where there are certain decision points which looks challenging at some point of time. But I would say always evaluate any decision on merits, not on I would say hearsay or what people tell you. But I always say, you should listen to your logic, and your logic has to be strong, and your logic will be strong when you read well, when you understand the world well. Uh, and like in the current generation, I would always say the biggest problem is that you don't have time because you're so busy on your smartphones. Like it's like saying, I tell my son, if you want to study for 12 hours, you have to fight with yourself not to keep your phone on for 3 hours, because you are also distracted a lot by your chatting in multiple chat rooms, multiple applications on your phone, each popping up messages at different points of time. So there is the current generation I see, there is a basic issue of span of attention, wherein it's like saying that you do you do 8 hours of solid work, or you do 16 hours of work, and then you sort of keep on stopping in between. So the quality is more important than the quantity of time that spent. I think that's what will actually keep you going and keep you in high state. How much quality of time you give to yourself. And a corporate is all about your delivery, how well you deliver things, how well you're focused, how detailed you are, and also right attitude. Very important, because you have to get along with so many people. You have your seniors, your juniors, your peers. Like all of you are final years when you pass out, but then you start as first years when you come into corporate. So you become the senior most person in your academics, and you straight away start as a junior most person in your job in a corporate. But that's very interesting part of it. You start your different, it's a different stage of life you're getting into. So always keep your attitude right, respect people, learn at all times, I think that's all I can tell, because that's nothing more I've learned. Other things are all technical I've learned. But I think the most important thing that has kept me going is continuous learning, rare attitude, good character at all times. Most important, character. A character is, I think, very important to keep you going in your personal life and your professional life. No shortcuts. Shortcuts never help you, because they actually the shortcut is the longest route to a destination, I always say, because you think there's a shortcut, but you end up, going in circles and then finally reaching last at the destination. So there are no shortcuts in the world. Keep your mind high on innovation, because any corporate likes people who are high on innovation, high on energy. And energy comes from yourself. Energy comes from your thought processes. Keep your mind always positive. I think most important in life is the positivity that you maintain, in terms of how you look at issues, how you look at situations, how you look at things. You can get frustrated by situation, you can get motivated by situation. It's like some sayings are there. I don't know if you guys would have read it. I am successful because of my enemies, which is very, very relevant, because the people who oppose you are the people who actually make you. Other people are challenging you at all times. You may hate a person who's opposing you, but on one side you should also understand that that person has actually brought the best out of you, because the fact that he's opposing makes you work more and get you on a higher pedestal. So every situation, as you view it, it's either an opportunity or an adverse situation. But actually, if you can look at it as an opportunity and learn from it and then move ahead, and then actually the life becomes much easier. This is not only in corporate. I think this also applies in your personal life, when you deal with people, deal with friends, deal with colleagues, because you're all a social animal. We need all these support systems around us. So corporate is just about that. Rest is each person's luck and how much effort they put into it and what vision they have for their life. Obviously, you need to plan your career. You need to know where you're going. You cannot simply sit and wait for things to come to your lap. You'll have to sort of plan your movement to success. However you define your success. Since you're talking corporate, I would say up the corporate ladder. If you're some other area you want to excel in, please do that and be happy about it. But plan it well. Have a vision for yourself. Decide where you want to go, how you want to go, what are your milestones, and then sort of plan it and then move ahead on it. Was that fine, Dr. Sen?
Yes, sir. Completely agree with you. And this is apt to come from a person who has been so successful in life. And it is not only important to be successful, but also to be a gentleman, also to earn respect, because these things don't come in easy. So your advice to the students is bang on target, and I hope that our students take these advices very seriously. Nevertheless, they should also be enjoying.
One word I say when I tell my wherever I worked, I've told people, from a sweeper to CEO, each one of them are doing a job in an organization. So I think respect to human being for whatever effort they are putting in. I think this whole corona pandemic has shown that a sweeper is more important than many of us in the society. At least he keeps the he keeps the area clean, and thereby ensuring your health and protection, and your survival. So I think, like I always say in solar manufacturing, for example, I used to tell my people whenever I used to address them the last 3-4 years, or even in Balco, I'd say every single person who's working in an organization has an equal contribution. You may be paying them less, paying them more is a different matter. But at the end of the day, respect to human beings, I think that's most important that all of us have to learn. Many of us do not have that attribute, and typically coming from an Indian mindset wherein we are very feudalistic in many societies, many parts of this country. I think unshackling that, looking at people as human beings, and appreciating any work that they do, I think that's one big thing that can make you a big leader. Because it is not about throwing your weight around. It is not about showing our ego, which makes you a big person. I don't know how many of you have even met Abdul Kalam, who was from a very modest moorings. He came up to the president of India. If you've seen the village where he was born, you cannot even imagine that he can even become an engineer, leave alone the president of the country. It is somewhere near Rameshwaram. I don't know if you have seen that place. It's called Dhanushkodi. Any South Indian in the forum can relate to it. Even today, if you go there, Dr. Sen, it's one of those most ramshackled villages in the country. From there, 30, 40 years, 50 years back, he has come up and he has become president of this country. And when you talk to him, I've a couple of times interacted with him in some forums, once in a flight when I sat next to him. He's so humble. So that your learning happens only when you are humble. Humility is most important in life. And appreciation of people all around you. Whoever is doing, okay, appreciate them. Everybody is contributing to the excellence of the organization. So I think that's a very important message that each one of us should carry as we move forward in our life. I think I've done, Dr. Sen. I think I've given my advice.
Yes, sir. I was very privileged to have met Dr. Kalam, and I also went to Dhanushkodi 2-3 years ago. And right now, it's an abundant village. So after say 1976, I think there was a tsunami kind of a storm, and then it became an abundant village. So it was really the humility that you talked about is not only in great people, but that's what makes them great, actually.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
In any field, if you take, be it sports or politics or academics or corporate world, great people are most humble people. So the crux of the matter is that if we were to be successful, we should try to be successful in life, and then that would take us to be successful in any of these spheres of life.
True.
So thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your enlightening words today. And you talked about your experience. You talked about the energy sector, the renewable sector, solar, wind, hydrogen, and about carbon footprint and many other things. So thank you for your time and effort. And I wish the students have a lot to gain from your advice. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It would have been a pleasure to meet the students in person. So let me ask you a question. Are you now in online class mode, or what is it? Like, what's going on now?
Right. We are now holding online classes.
Okay. So how long will this go? You're not very clear how long this will go.
So it all depends on AICT guidelines. So once the government gives approval for holding physical classes, we are more than ready to do that.
I understand. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Wish you all the best. Wish you a very successful learning time the next 2 years and a very bright career as you go forward in your life. So look forward to meeting you all in person at some point of time, very, very close in the near future. Thank you, Dr. Sen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody. See you tomorrow again at 11 o'clock. Bye.
We have Sohil Barat, Rochit Jain with us. They are also from the solar team. And Sohil or Rochit, if you can say something to the students, your journey.
Sure, sir. So our journey here in company, right, or during the for
Yeah,
2 years
from
of
AM to solar.
yes. So okay, yeah. So
So hi,
sir,
Sohail. How are you doing?
yes, sir.
How are you doing, Sohail? So it's been a
I'm doing
long
good.
time since we have met.
Yes, sir. We are doing good, and Rochit is also with me only. So the journey here is very good. From I initially when I joined in, I told them that whatever you will learn there, and you will get the best out of it in the 2 years, and then things will fall apart in their place. Whatever as per your the efforts you put. So that being the major part, I'll just like to advise them that whatever comes in place in this 2 years, take it as an opportunity and study accordingly, and things will fall in place accordingly. So and the journey was good. They learn a lot of new courses, and we have a variety versatile courses, lot of courses here. So they will get the domain knowledge of whole infrastructure sector. and especially renewable power, ports, also the financial aspects.
Okay, now over to Rochit. Rochit, you have anything to say?
Hello everyone over here, and first of all, I would like to say that since you are done with your graduation and you have come over here, so it's a great opportunity for all over here to learn and get along ahead in life. Like you already have good faculties over here who will guide you well. You have good group exposure. Obviously, you have good group backup. The 2 years of your life would totally depend on how you manage your time and how you manage your studies, and basically how you utilize it in your next job when you'll get it. So hope to see you all someday over here. I also stay in Shantigram. See you soon, and all the best to everyone over here. Thank you
Okay,
so much,
thank
sir.
you, Sohail and Rochit,
Yes, yeah.
for your
Thank you.
advice.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay,
Sir,
so
anything
that
is. Hello.
Cancel करो.